London, England, June 30th, 2021. At a meeting of the House of Lords, the Second Chamber of Parliament, Minister of Defense Baroness Annabel Goldie is questioned about the just-released report on unidentified aerial phenomena issued by the United States, and is asked if the UK plans on issuing a report of its own.
Baroness Goldie answered in a way that said that there is no threat. She was very careful how she phrased it. She said, there has never been a proven threat. Reading between the lines, that said to me that unless these things are going to start shooting at our aeroplanes, they're not considered a threat.
But while the British Parliament has no plans to release its own UAP report, it was recently discovered that for more than 70 years, UFO activity was closely monitored by some of the most prominent members of the royal family. April 9th, 2021, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, passes away at the age of 99. As publications across the world report on his incredible life, it comes to light that the prince had a long-held fascination with the UFO phenomenon.
When Prince Philip died in the spring of 2021, there was a bit of a surprise to the British public, and that was that Prince Philip had a huge collection of books on UFOs that went right back to the mid-1940s.
He had an associate named Sir Peter Horsley, who was a former RAF pilot. He was a good friend of Prince Philip, and back in the mid-1950s was charged by the prince to do a lot of research into this whole flying saucer situation.
The two of them, over the years, researched and investigated this quietly, kept an eye on all the developments, secretly subscribed to various UFO magazines and newsletters, and even had witnesses interviewed. But a lot of this, of course, was highly sensitive. I mean, here you have the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, researching and investigating UFOs. Had the news got out, it would have caused a sensation.
While those within the UFO community had long been aware of Prince Philip's investigations into strange phenomena, most of the public only learned of it with his passing. And it also came to light that another member of the British royal family was responsible for one of Great Britain's earliest UFO reports. Hampshire, England, 1955. On the morning of February 23rd at 8:30 a.m., bricklayer Frederick Briggs is riding his bike when he encounters a startling sight. An enormous object in the sky above his employer's estate.
He said this thing was huge. It was hovering a short distance above the ground. Some sort of column descended, and a figure emerged, a humanoid figure wearing some sort of dark uniform and perhaps wearing a hat or a helmet. And at one point, he talks about a force knocking him off his bicycle and holding him down. And he talks about the UFO as having windows around the side of it and seeing a strange light. It's a quite extraordinary account.
This close encounter event was so remarkable to Fred Briggs that he thought it was necessary to tell the actual owner of this estate. And that just so happened to be Lord Mountbatten, who was the uncle of Prince Philip, who was married to Queen Elizabeth.
At the time of the sighting, Lord Louis Mountbatten, former Governor General of India, was the first Sea Lord of the British Royal Navy.
This is a UFO sighting at the home of one of the most senior figures in the British establishment.
We know so much about this because they recorded the whole thing. They actually took a statement from the bricklayer. Lord Mountbatten wrote up a report. They all signed them all.
And he talked extensively to Prince Philip about this. I mean, you have to assume this whole thing went through the entire royal household. You have to assume Queen Elizabeth knew all about this.
Lord Mountbatten would have access as friends and colleagues to the people in the MOD who were keeping the secret information about UFOs and ETs. And that is my guess, is the fuel that kept Prince Philip so interested, because they were telling each other, this is real, this is true.
Tokyo, Japan, December 18th, 2007. Ryuji Yamana of the Democratic Party of Japan, under increasing pressure from his constituents, publicly demands a response from the Prime Minister and his cabinet to address the surge of UFO activity over Japan, totaling more than 300 reported sightings per month. The cabinet's official statement is that it has not confirmed the existence of unidentified flying objects from outer space. But within a few hours, everything changes.
Just hours after this meeting, the Chief Cabinet Secretary Nobutaka Machimura announced on live television that regarding the question of extraterrestrials, he definitely thinks they exist. Then, a week later, the Japanese Defense Minister Shigeru Ishiba revealed that he had been carefully considering different response scenarios for an alien invasion. And what he said is incredible. He said, and I quote, "There are no grounds for us to deny that there are unidentified flying objects and some life forms that controls them."
2 years later, the wife of the Prime Minister came out with an extraordinary series of statements in which she claimed that she had been abducted by aliens, that she had traveled on a UFO. For the wife of the Prime Minister to come out and make a statement like that was absolutely unprecedented. I think the only reason this isn't on the front page of every newspaper in the world is that certainly in the United States, we do tend to be rather heavily focused on English-speaking countries, and indeed very US-centric in our outlook. If the statements being made in Japan were being made in America, it would be on every major news network 24/7.
Could these profound statements coming from top Japanese government officials reveal that they have knowledge of alien visitation? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest evidence of alien contact on these islands dates back thousands of years and can be found within the teachings of Shintoism. Shintoism is the primary religion of Japan. At its center are celestial beings that, according to the Japanese people, still roam their islands to this day.
The term Shinto translates as the way of the kami, or the way of the gods. It's a tradition that has a millennia-long history in Japan. There are over 8 million kamis according to the Shinto tradition, and each one of them has its own particular personality traits, if you will. So in that sense, they are quite different from the notion of monotheistic God that we have in traditions that are most widespread in the West.
The kami are these celestial beings that are able to inhabit basically anything, from a human being to an animal and even inanimate objects. So on the one hand, they're these multi-dimensional beings, but then they also describe them as having come down from their celestial palace in the sky, which is called Takamagahara.
The celestial kami will come into the terrestrial world, our world, and they need a home. So they have these major shrines for these kami when they come into the world so that they can feel at home in the terrestrial world.
The Japanese archipelago is dotted with over 81,000 shrines that are devoted to the kami gods. And it's believed that these are houses or places where these extraterrestrial beings come to live when they're on Earth. The Japanese people will visit the shrines of the kami with the belief that they are actually praying to an extraterrestrial being who can fulfill their blessings.
January 26, 2011, Sun Shili, a former Chinese Foreign Ministry official who worked directly with Mao Zedong, comes forward with a shocking revelation. The Chinese government is aware of extraterrestrials visiting Earth.
The government held an objective and practical attitude and allowed us to do abundant research, reports, and discussions on the topic. They pay great attention to this topic, especially the military, the Air Force, and Civil Aviation Department, which encounter UFO cases frequently.
Sun Shili said that not only were the Chinese government aware that extraterrestrials were visiting the Earth, but also that some aliens were actually living among us, disguised in human form. His revelations are an absolute bombshell. I mean, clearly this shines a new light on what may have been going on in relation to this subject in one of the most secret societies on the face of this planet.
Shili claimed to have discovered sensitive information about government knowledge of extraterrestrials while serving Chairman Mao. And he also had his own close encounter.
In 1972, I was in the central government. I was working in the Foreign Affairs Department. We were on evening duty when we saw a shiny UFO in the sky, like a small moon. It was smaller than the moon, but was very bright. It moved up and down. It disappeared after about 10 minutes or so.
I met Dr. Sun Shili in 2013 in Washington, D.C. We were both speakers at the citizen hearing on disclosure. I had a chance to meet with Sun Shili and discuss some of this with him firsthand. He's entirely sincere about this.
Could Sun Shili, a man who worked closely with one of the most powerful world leaders in history, really have inside knowledge about extraterrestrials visiting Earth? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest that China, a historically isolationist country, may have secretly been in contact with extraterrestrials for decades, and possibly longer.
China has always been insular. There's always been a sense that the rest of the world was unimportant, that China was for China and for the Chinese, and they were very careful about any secrets that came out.
China is a notoriously closed and secret society. Is this in relation to UFOs because they know something? Could it be that they've found something?
The Chinese government does not feel obligated to explain their views on UFOs or their research. I am sure they are concerned that those who study UFOs sometimes see military tests in the skies of China. They are a self-immersed civilization, and they don't feel, perhaps, that they need to share all their historical knowledge with the others.
London, England, 2007. The British Ministry of Defence, or MOD, makes a startling announcement. They are releasing the entirety of their UFO files to the National Archives of England.
My belief is that the MOD's motive was to have people stop asking them questions. They could get away from all these difficult Freedom of Information Act requests that people were making. And they framed it in a way that it was all about cost-cutting, but in reality, it was almost as if they just didn't want anything to do with the subject anymore. I still believe they take a very active interest in the subject, but they don't want to be seen publicly to take that interest.
After a rollout that took more than a decade, it came to light that the Ministry of Defense had accumulated over 60,000 documents pertaining to UFO encounters. But researchers sorting through the archives were able to determine that 18 key files were missing.
There were a number of very famous cases where people had taken some really good photos, some really good film imagery that the MOD can't now find. Large parts of their files were seemingly destroyed, and it seems they have a very good history on losing really important bits of information.
After a request was submitted, Ministry of Defense officials located the missing files.
Each file, by the way, contains upward of maybe 100, 200 documents. So we're talking thousands of documents. They sent those files to the National Archives, and everyone was expecting an imminent release. But in an unprecedented move, the Ministry of Defense then recalled the files. Now, I've never heard of this happening before. To date, these 18 files remain under lock and key. So something very mysterious is going on.
Why would the British Ministry of Defense send UFO files to the National Archives and then suddenly recall them without explanation? Some government insiders have suggested that the files were moved for safekeeping, while another, even more secure facility was being prepared. When the National Archives returned the files to the British government, they were spirited away to an undisclosed location. There are those who believe that location is a former Royal Air Force base in the southwest county of Wiltshire called Rudloe Manor, a site that the Ministry of Defense used to perform UFO investigations dating back to the 1940s. On the surface, it appears to be nothing more than a quaint English manor house. But deep beneath this structure lie an astounding 2.2 million square feet of vast caverns divided into many smaller chambers. These underground quarries were excavated in the 19th century to mine bathstone, a type of limestone used to build the nearby city of Bath and several other English cities. 1 century later, in 1939, England was drawn into World War II, and the British Royal Air Force took over the depleted quarries, transforming them into an underground aircraft factory. At the end of the war, many such facilities were returned to civilian control. But Rudloe Manor and its over 2 million square feet of secret tunnels and chambers were never surrendered.
For years, it was home to a group called the Provost and Security Services. They're kind of like the James Bonds of the British Royal Air Force. They do espionage investigations, counterintelligence programs, things like that, even terrorism investigations. But back in the 1990s, and certainly going back to the 1950s, the Provost and Security Services were heavily involved in UFO investigations.
Now, for years, the Air Force and the Ministry of Defense denied that any UFO investigations were going on at Rudloe Manor. Then a document got released, and it showed that actually, yes, UFO investigations had been done from Rudloe Manor, and the staff there had been working hand in glove with those of us in the headquarters building in London.